Special Unit 1. The Examiner. Vicky woke up with a terrible pain in her stomach. The day she had feared arrived. Today she would take her driving test. But she was always the unlucky one. Nothing seemed to go right for her. Vicky was 17 and still in school. She had worked at a fast food restaurant on Saturday evenings to pay for her driving lessons. Her father, and sometimes her brothers, took her out on the road for practice. In Britain, all you have to do is put an L plate on the car, and then anybody with a driving licence can accompany you on the road. The test is in 2 parts. Usually you are asked questions on the highway code for about 10 minutes, and then you are asked to drive for about 40 minutes with an examiner.
Don't worry,
said Vicky's instructor.
You drive very well and you know your highway code backwards.
That was true, but Vicky also happened to know that there were 3 possible examiners, one of whom disliked passing young drivers, especially girls. 2 of her friends had had Mr. Crowbody. No matter how carefully they drove, they failed. She had often seen him. He never smiled. Vicky could hardly swallow her breakfast. Her mother offered to drop her off at the test centre in town. When Vicky arrived at the centre, her heart sank. There before her, frowning at a piece of paper, was Mr. Crowbody. Hair grew out of his ears, and his dark suit seemed too small. He looked up.
Are you Miss Cooper? You're 2 minutes late.
Not a good start. The highway code seemed to go all right as Vicky nervously answered his staccato questions. He appeared almost irritated that he couldn't catch her out. At last they were in the car together. He had his clipboard ready on his knee, and his bright eyes watched her closely.
Right. Miss Cooper, would you please start driving? We shall turn right at the intersection.
They turned right and drove out of town. Vicky began to relax just a little. Suddenly, a man jumped into the road in front of her. Vicky stepped hard on the brakes and the examiner's clipboard went flying.
Quickly, to the hospital!
The man shouted.
The taxi hasn't arrived. My wife is having a baby.
He opened the back door and helped his wife in. She was very large and was breathing hard. Vicky thought about what to do for a moment. She started driving and accelerated quickly.
Faster, please!
She was already well over the speed limit of 50 kilometres an hour.
Go up this one-way street. It's quicker.
Vicky took a look at the examiner, but his face was expressionless. Suddenly, they were going the wrong way up a one-way street. Then a large car came into sight in front. Vicky almost lost control. There was a bump, and they were on the pavement. A police officer saw them and then reached for his radio. Then they were onto the main street which led into town. The speedometer climbed to 130 as they shot down the right-hand side, overtaking everything that was on the road. The traffic lights were changing to red, but Vicky put her foot down on the accelerator. At last they reached the hospital. Vicky ran to get a nurse while the man helped his wife out. She was crying in pain now. Vicky climbed back in a few minutes later and looked towards the examiner, who hadn't said a word the whole time. He looked at her sternly.
Do you realize, young lady, that you broke nearly every rule that is in the book? I can't possibly pass you. However,
Mr. Crowbody's mouth moved a little as if he might smile.
You have an excellent future ahead of you as a race car driver. I am sure that as you drive me back to the test center, you will be able to persuade me that you know how to drive in a proper manner. You behaved with great presence of mind.